I think we'll get started. And Allison, I'm going to put you on the hot seat first. So why don't you start us off in explaining what stewardship is, please?
Sure. So stewardship is really about thinking about your actions and the impact they have on the world around you, both today and into the future. I think in acting in a way that really shows care for the world and for others. So doing things like planting trees, removing invasive species, keeping septic systems in good condition, those are all actions that really show good stewardship.
So it's about taking action on your land then. So why is it important for landowners to take care of their land? Doesn't nature just care for itself?
Yeah, well, I think it really depends on how you view nature. Humans are a part of the natural world, and there isn't really nature that is out there. Human activity can have a positive or a negative impact on other parts of the natural system, and that really in turn impacts how other parts of nature affect us in return. So to me, it's really a relationship.
Relationships, I like that. So when I think of relationships, I'm also often thinking of farmers. They're the thing that come to my mind first. So Mark, how does stewardship differ for farmers and agricultural landowners?
Well, when you think of farmers and agricultural landowners as managing their property, they're doing it with another objective in mind as well, which is really to produce the fuel, food, and fiber that we all need in society. So the way I look at it when I'm thinking about the farm land base is that what stewardship means to a farmer is not only taking care of the woodlands, wetlands, watercourses on the farm, but it also means taking care of those worked farm spaces, so the open field spaces, being careful to maintain and better yet improve the productivity of their soils while minimizing agricultural inputs such as fertilizers and pesticides as well.
So what you're saying is agricultural stewardship benefits the farmer and the earth.
Yeah, stewardship really does support long-term success of the farm business while benefiting the earth. Like for instance, let's take soil health. When a farmer reduces their field's susceptibility to erosion, which is really simply the loss of topsoil, by planting windbreaks and buffer strips and diversifying their crop rotation, um, this can really help with their long-term resilience of their farm system. They're keeping more of that precious resource on the farm, and over time it leads to greater topsoil depth, the ability of their crop roots to grow deep into the soil profile, accessing more water and nutrients than they would have otherwise. But this also pays us dividends from an environmental perspective. Those deep topsoils infiltrate water really well, protect us against flooding, and all of our downstream communities benefit from that when we do it.
Okay, so it's easy to see how farmers benefit from stewardship. It ensures their land remains healthy and productive. Allison, how do residential landowners benefit from stewardship?
Yeah,
Oh,
sure. They benefit from stewardship in a lot of ways. So caring for the land and water and wildlife on your property really has so many benefits. It really means you're working with nature and rather than against it. It can reduce the amount of effort that's required to maintain certain aspects of your property. For example, a natural meadow versus a manicured lawn requires a lot less effort to maintain. It can also protect your property from damage and degradation, erosion, flooding, invasive species, tree damage. These are all areas that can be affected by how you're managing your property and good stewardship. And there's less tangible benefits like improved mental health. So many of the landowners that I work with, they talk about experiencing positive benefits from just having that experience and connection with the nature on their properties. And of course, there's many direct benefits like improving air and water quality, conserving water, soil, energy, habitat, building resilience to climate change. So these things, they benefit the landowner, but they also benefit our local communities and the environment more broadly.
Okay, so far both of you have mentioned planting trees as a stewardship action that farmers and residential landowners can take on the properties. So Alistair, you're up next. So why is it important to plant trees and then manage those forests? What are the benefits to landowners?
Yeah, well, conserving and managing for healthy forests is important because it can help you to maintain and enhance ecological goods and services and also build resilient forests. Healthy forests, they perform a significant role in climate change mitigation as they sequester carbon through annual tree growth. And through the management of forests, it can encourage tree health and vigor, can stimulate new growth, and it can increase tree species diversity. All of these add to sequestration potential. And also, in addition, forest management, such as like periodic plantation thinning, it can help reduce the risk of wildfire. It can accelerate the transition to more diverse forests. And tree planting itself is an important part of forest management, particularly forest regeneration. It can offer a wide variety of benefits to landowners depending on the scale and the objective of the planting. Benefits can range from reducing costs associated with heating and cooling your homes, providing greater crop yields to farmers, reducing soil erosion, increasing property value, and also increasing wildlife habitat. And as an added bonus, if the planting area is large enough, then landowners can be eligible for a property tax reduction.
Cool. And how can CVC help landowners with their tree planting projects?
Well, CVC has two different programs for tree planting. The first program is naturalization, and through this program, CVC plants native potted stock. So the stock's a combination of shrubs, deciduous trees, and coniferous trees. And CVC's TRM program subsidizes part of the planting cost, and subsidies can range from anywhere from 50 to 85%. For this program, the minimum property size is 2 acres, and the minimum planting size is 100 units. And the second program is our reforestation program. And so through this, CVC plants bare root seedlings. The stock is mostly conifers with about 10 to 15% deciduous trees. And through this program, our funding partner, Forest Ontario, funds approximately 75% of the total cost. But in certain cases, funding can reach 100%. And for this, the minimum property size is 2 acres, and the minimum planting is 750 units. And for both of these planting programs, CVC offers site visits free of charge. And the project itself that includes a detailed planting plan and map, the trees, planting labor, and also follow-up survival monitoring. And certain projects may include watering or future tending.
So that sounds like some good subsidies. Mark, are these subsidies available for farmers as well?
Yeah, the subsidies that Alistair's just mentioned are available to farmers. And then also depending on the municipality in which the farm is located in the event where we aren't able to hit that 100% subsidy, we can apply for some municipal level grants that could bring the funding up to 100%.
Okay, so planting native trees and shrubs is a great way to restore our earth with the many benefits to farmers and residential landowners. But occasionally, if there are invasive species present, we need to address those first. So Lee, can you tell us what invasive species are and why landowners should care about them?
Sure, yeah. Invasive species are an introduced and non-native species to that area. It can be things like plants, insect, mammals, among other living things. And they can be introduced in a variety of ways, often through shipping pallets, transportation of moving vehicles. They can be introduced unintentionally through horticultural industry as plants in gardens, or they can be released as fishing bait. Sometimes they can even be moved by other animals, attached to birds, or along waterways through moving water, among many other ways. So once they're introduced, they have the ability to outcompete native species for resources and space, and they're often generalists and can thrive in a variety of conditions. They usually have no predators in that area, and then they can cause detrimental effects to natural habitats and ultimately lead to a loss of biodiversity. They often cause irreversible changes to the introduced habitat. So an example would be plants can cause changes to the moisture regime and soil chemistry, and that can make it harder for native species to persist or recolonize the area even. On top of that, the negative environmental impacts, they also can have other negative impacts on economic things like limiting agricultural yields or damaging infrastructure. And they can also have effects on us to human health. An example would be the plant giant hogweed, which can cause severe skin reactions.
Okay, so how can a landowner find out whether they have an invasive species on their property?
Yeah, so there's plenty of great resources which can help landowners learn more about invasive species in Southern Ontario. Some examples would be the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, Invasive Species Awareness Program, and the Invasive Species Center. They all have great online resources that can help landowners identify and learn about common invasive species. We also have a variety of resources on our website. There's profiles of some common invasive species on there, as well as some other resources, things like Grow Me Instead guides, which have some alternative natives that you can plant as opposed to invasive species in your garden. And there's also some profiles of actual work that we're doing to combat invasive species on our properties. And our invasive species management team is available for personal consultation on your problems. Myself or another technician can talk with landowners about the problem that they have and answer any questions.
So let's say they do find invasive species on their property. What programs are available to help landowners?
Right. So ultimately, the best course of action we would recommend is to work towards controlling and managing them before they cause detrimental and irreversible negative impacts to your land. Things like decreasing property value, less recreational and aesthetic value. They can block views, cause untraversable areas on your land. Onto all of that, on top of the limited value that they have for our native species. So for help, we're available to coordinate a site visit, and usually pending COVID at the moment, but during which the site visits, we can assess the extent of the invasive species on your property, usually draft up a preliminary map and share some insight and resources that are specific to the problem that you have. And then we can provide recommendations for control and management, and look into the scale of the problem and whether you have resources and capabilities to tackle it yourself, or if you're interested, we can direct you towards a qualified contractor that can provide you with an invasive control service. Okay.
So planting trees and removing invasive species are great stewardship actions that any landowner can take, that they have great benefits for the earth. But of course, these actions may not be suitable for every property. There are lots of other stewardship actions that landowners can take, but sometimes managing larger properties can even be overwhelming for landowners. So Allison, you're up next. What's the best way for landowners to get started with their properties?
Yeah, I think the most important thing really is to have just a basic understanding of your property's natural features, just the same way that you would with the systems in your home. So really getting to know what's on your property, thinking about how your activities can impact the land and water on your property. And again, we have staff here that are available to help. So if landowners are looking at their property, trying to get a better understanding of their property's natural features, we can help them identify the areas of concern and action, as you've heard, and figure out ways that they can have the best impact for their properties and for the environment.
Okay, and Mark, I'm assuming there's similar programs for farmers available as well?
Yeah, we really do have similar programs, and we really encourage farmers, if they have questions or concerns, to give us a call. Right now, due to COVID, this is best done through phone or email. And if you've got that really tough challenge on your farm that you're looking for help with, we love digging into the research for you to help get you answers to the challenge you're maybe struggling with. And then depending on the nature of the inquiry you might have, we might recommend setting up an on-site visit. We have ways we can still do this now during our COVID times. It's a bit more, takes a bit more pre-planning, but we can still do it at current moment. And, you know, don't feel like you need to have everything figured out exactly what you want to do on your property. We like working with landowners early on in that stage, which are just looking for broad level assistance and scoping of project potential, right up to those who do know exactly what they want. And we can be flexible in our approach with you. The rural water, so we have a few programs that support these actual services, and the one key one is our rural water quality program. It's for farmers in Wellington, Dufferin, and Peel, and it provides grants up to $25,000 per project, depending on that project type. So we can do things like manure storages, erosion control structures, cover cropping, tree planting, and wetland restoration in this program. And then for farmers in Halton, it's a slightly different program, but we tap in and we access funding through what is typically thought of as a rural non-farming program, the Landowner Action Fund. And through this program, Halton farmers can do wetland restoration, grassland restoration, and tree planting, as well as drinking well water projects. And lastly, one other program I want to touch on is we do have our bird-friendly certified hay program that works with farmers and non-farmers to match them up for the purpose of growing later cut hay, which really benefits at-risk grassland birds that make their nests in those hay fields. And delaying that hay harvest until mid-July really helps them thrive.
Okay, lots of great resources for landowners. Thanks, everyone.
Sorry,
So
Karen, I just wanted
Yes.
to mention, because Mark had mentioned the Landowner Action Fund. So again, that is for primarily rural residential landowners, and we reimburse 30 to 100% of the cost of stewardship projects, depending on the environmental merit of the project. So that is also available again for projects like Mark had mentioned, wetlands, grasslands. It tops up the tree planting subsidies that are offered as well as drinking water projects. So that's available for rural residential landowners across the watershed. And again, we can also connect landowners with outside funding opportunities that exist, for example, through the municipality or the province. So that is, again, some things that we offer for our rural residential landowners.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so that wraps up this portion of the presentation. So we're going to send all of this information back to you in a follow-up email after the webinar, so just in case you missed anything. But now we want to hear from you. So if you haven't already, please add your question to the chat box or use the hands up feature, and we'll call on you one at a time to ask your question, turn on your mic and turn on your cameras and that sort of thing. So just to get started, to give people some time to figure out what their questions are, there were a couple of questions that were asked ahead of time when people registered. So one of the questions was, what are some of the ways to keep soil healthy and productive as possible? So I'm going to turn that one over to Mark.
Yeah, so this is a topic that's gaining a lot of popularity in the last 5, 6, 7 years, ever since the International Year of Soil Health. Farmers have really been, pardon the pun, digging deep in discovering their soils and better understanding their soils. And the way I like to communicate it is there's sort of 5 key actions to think about when you're looking to improve soil health. And I shouldn't say they're actions; they're more they're a little higher level than that. So really, the first one is to till less. We're learning more and more that just disturbance of the soil, breaking up that structure, really limits its ability to infiltrate water, cycle water, pull water back to the surface into the rooting zone for your crop, and having some negative impacts when we see very intensive continual tillage on farms. So tilling it less, number one. Keeping it covered. So getting a layer of armor, it's often referred to as, on that soil surface. This can be in the form of a living or dead mulch. It can be in the form of a cover crop. I mentioned cover crops as something we're funding, but essentially we don't want to see that bare soil exposed to the surface. Keeping it covered prevents rain from pounding that surface, breaking up the structure of the soil, and just letting it do its job. Keeping continual and living plants and roots in the soil system as long as possible. We're in a northern climate. We have winter. It's difficult to achieve, but it is possible. I'm working with growers that are doing amazing things with cover crops, getting them in quite late in the season with things like cereal rye that can germinate and get growing down to even -5-degree weather, getting established in the fall, going dormant, not dead, but dormant over winter, and still feeding a biological community within that topsoil over the winter months. And then they get growing as soon as the snow gets melted off. And then following up with planting their crop into that stand of cereal rye and starting it all over again once their cash crop, the crop they're looking to actually harvest, comes off. They're getting it right back into another cover crop. This has tremendous benefits, keeping weed seed pressure down and feeding that microbiological community. Also, just diversity of plants, making sure we've got lots of diversity in that rotation. Different plants benefit different soil microbes, and that's important for soil health. And the last one is, wherever possible, getting organic amendments into that soil. Can be in the form of compost, can be in the form of manure, can be in the form of a commercially bought and organic sourced fertilizer amendment in some way, shape, or form. But that's being shown as very beneficial too.
Thanks, Mark. So the next question that was provided ahead of time, this one I'll address to Allison. So how do you maintain a healthy septic and well system?
Okay, yeah, sure. It's very important, especially this time of year. I think spring is a really good time actually to be looking at your well. It's a good time to be testing your well water quality, which you should be trying to do at least 3 times a year. And in the springtime, you've got a lot of water moving across the land and potentially picking up pollutants. So it's a good time to be able to detect if there's any contamination getting in. You really want to be protecting your well by making sure that your well cap and is intact in the seal and that it's watertight. Making sure that the ground is sloping away from your well so that the water is running away from it and not towards it. And really making sure that that area around your well is clear of garbage, pets. You actually don't want to be gardening around your well. If you do have old wells that you're not using anymore, making sure that those are decommissioned, because those can be a pathway for contaminants to get into your well water. And of course, septic systems are connected to making sure that your well water stays clean, because if you're not maintaining your septic, that is a potential source of contamination as well. So again, the standard is to really be pumping your septic tank every 3 to 5 years. You really want to be checking your septic bed for any signs of failure as well. So, you know, if it's starting to smell, it's looking spongy and wet, those can be issues. If you've got trees that are going into that leaching bed, they can actually be impacting the integrity of that leaching bed. And if you do detect that there is a problem, making sure that you have those repairs done promptly so that you're not, again, getting any contamination into the water system. Some other basic maintenance things is don't put hazardous products, oils, fats, all of that stuff is very hard to treat within your system. So those things are really, especially any hazardous waste, should be going to a hazardous waste center. And basic water conservation is important too, right? So the more that you use any system, the more that the use that it gets, the more work that it's going to get. So it's not going to last as long. So water conservation is both important in terms of maintaining the quantity of our water sources, but also in protecting your septic system over the long term. And if you don't have an effluent filter on your tank going into the leaching bed, that is another way that you can prolong the life of your septic system. So there's a lot of things that go into maintaining your well and septic system, and those are some of the things that you can be doing to make sure that it's healthy and that your drinking water stays clean as well.
Okay, thanks very much. So this was the third question that was submitted ahead of time. This one was a little bit tricky. Should you use fungicides to maintain tree health? I think we needed a little bit more information to be able to answer that adequately. So if the person who asked that is here today, could they please turn on their camera or at least your mic and maybe give us a little bit more information, whether you're talking about crop trees like fruits and nuts, or whether you're talking about forested areas. Well, I see someone typing in the chat. We're just trying to figure out how best to answer the question. But we do need a little bit more info. Okay. No, whoops. Can't see this. No specific question. Okay, so Mark, did you want to address the fungicide thing?
Yeah, certainly I can do that, Karen.
Okay.
So making an assumption, we're speaking about tree fruit and tree nut crops. I would say there's a different approach than there would be for anything native, which I have less familiarity with. So my background is really in agriculture and minimizing the impact on the natural environment in agricultural systems. So I think prevention is key when dealing with any form of crop pest. So you want to make sure that you're choosing varieties of tree crops that have some natural susceptibility to the crops that could be the diseases and pests that could be prevalent in your area. So choosing those varieties that make the most sense and allow you to reduce the amount of input used in your farm production system. So that's where it starts, even before the planting. If you're dealing with an existing fruit or tree nut orchard, it's a bit more complicated. I can understand and appreciate that you're going to want to maintain what's there now. And if you do have pest issues, the first step, in my opinion, is always think about culturally, what can you do in that orchard? So is it increasing a bit of airflow to reduce the prevalence of something like apple scab, or possibly doing a bit more cleaning of the understory in the fall so we don't get things overwintering and coming back up? Those sorts of cultural practices can really do a lot to prevent things. And then after that point in time, I think it's important then to develop a bit of a scouting routine where you're out and you're monitoring pest outbreaks in the orchard, and you have a good understanding of where thresholds are for action. So a little bit of scab you might be able to tolerate, or a bit of powdery mildew you might be able to tolerate, and it's not going to have a real economic hit on the operation. But once it hits a certain level, it's going to, and that's when maybe we might want to intervene with a bit of product, a fungicide, to deal with that pest that you're having at the time. If and when you do that, I think looking to organic sources make good sense. But again, with caution, just because they're maybe listed as approved in organic agriculture, please do still follow that label and take the direction. These substances still can have negative impacts on the natural environment. So still using care is important. If this all seems extremely complicated, well, first off, it is, and I'm no pro in it either, but we can help you find an integrated pest management specialist working in the area that can lay this all out and help you build a plan. And if you're in certain municipalities, we actually fund the creation of those through our rural water quality program as well. So reach out if this is of interest.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So I'm not seeing any questions or people's hands up. So if you do have a question, please give us a shout and do so now. We are coming up on time, but we do have a couple of minutes if you do have some questions for us. So please ask them now. Or just get in touch with us later too. That's an option as well if you're shy, camera shy. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you very much, folks, for joining us today. And thank you so much to our speakers. We really appreciate your time and expertise. And thanks so much to Calantha for wielding the hard stuff behind the scenes and making us look pretty amazing on camera. So thanks so much for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful Earth Day. Bye for now.
Thank you.